Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Stefano and I talk to you guys about health, wellness, and self-improvement. And the idea is that I'm your guinea pig. So I go through the research and I go through the motions to bring this information to you so that you can better yourself on a day-to-day basis. So for today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about nature versus nurture. Nature is basically the product of our genes. So the traits that we've inherited from our parents will shape our nature. That means my skin color is a certain way, my eye color is a certain way, that's just genetics, and some behavioral aspects come from your genetics as well. And what is nurture? Nurture is pretty much like the product of our upbringing. It's the environment in which we've lived in that has shaped the way we behave in certain situations and how we act in certain situations. And there are many schools of thoughts on nature versus nurture, which one impacts us more, which one determines who we are as people and how we act according to our behaviors. The best way to test nature versus nurture has been to take case studies of twins. And there is no better case study that I researched that I could find than the one on Jack Youth and Oscar Storr. Jack and Oscar are two twin brothers that were raised in radically different environments. Not too long ago, scientists wanted to use them as a case study to see what would be the difference in their behaviors depending on where they were living and the environment in which they were living. Jack and Oscar were born in Trinidad in 1933, and when they were around 6 months old, their parents divorced, and the two split ways, each one taking a child with them. Oscar moved to Germany with his Catholic mother, and Jack stayed in Trinidad with his father. So here, it's fairly clear that the nature of the two individuals are exactly the same. They are identical twins. That means that they will have the exact same facial composure, they will have the exact same skin tone, they will have the exact same eye color. Basically, from when they were born, they are identical. What makes it different now is the environment in which they lived in. Here's where nature can really shape a person. To a certain degree, of course. Storr, having lived in Germany with his mother, in the era of the Holocaust, he was raised as a Nazi. And Jack, however, was the son of a Jewish father and was raised as a Jew in Trinidad. So here, completely different type of upbringings and ideals on two identical individuals. A few years later, around 1954, Jack decided he wanted to go and find his brother in Germany. So he went to Germany, he found his brother, and this is where it got a bit weird. Despite the difference in environment in which they were living in, they found that they had very, very similar habits, mannerisms, and they were even wearing very, very similar clothing. So you can see by this example that our nature does have a certain amount of control in our behavior and the way we think or the habits that we have. But at the same time, our nurture or the environment in which we live can affect and change the way we think. Even though Jack and Oscar had very similar tastes and habits, they thought differently. As a Nazi, Oscar was thinking very radically, versus Jack, who was raised as Jewish, was more passive, but he still had the very similar habits and kind of mannerisms as Oscar. So as a biologist, if we go back to the evolution of mankind, our nature, our genetics have been shaped by the environment that we have been living in for so long, okay? So our bodies are adapted to a specific degree, like everybody is different in their nature, but overall we all have very similar nature genetics compared to other animals that make us more fit in the environment in which we have lived. Here's where I want to make my point. Our nature has been adapted to our environment for so many millennia. And it is only until recently, through westernization and industrialization, that we are not necessarily able to keep up with the changes in our environment. The changes meaning innovation, technology, all these things kind of accelerate the way we live. It is unprecedented compared to our history of living. Only recently, through westernization, industrialization, and innovation, is our nature trying to adapt and keep up, actually catch up to the change in our environment. That's why when I talk to clients or when I talk to friends, I encourage them to think of how we lived as cavemen, or even further back, or even maybe in the dark ages, you know. Before we had all this technology, all this innovation, we were living completely different. We didn't have light. We couldn't stay up at night. You know, we didn't have so many cars around. We had, you know, horses. We were adapted to that. That's why I advise people to think and mirror how our ancestors lived. A great example of this is our sleep schedules. So our circadian rhythm has been adapted to our environment, which has not changed. The amount of light and day and seasons that we have has not changed for the history of humanoids. So it's a great example to use. And I talked about this in a previous video. So if you want to know more about that, I'll put the link in the description down below. So check it out. Another example is foods, you know, processed foods versus whole foods. Only until recently, through westernization, industrialization, have we been able to mass produce food and to process it and package it so that it has a longer shelf life. And I mean, there are pros and there are cons, you know, using technology for our food, but there is a limit. You know, there's so many health problems now, you know, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, that we really have to pay attention to. And these, if you look at the chart over the millennia of human species, these problems have only recently been increasing exponentially, and that is correlated with westernization and industrialization. All right, so I'm not going to keep ranting about this. I'll give basically the main conclusion. Our bodies, our genetics, our nature has been adapted to our nurture, meaning the environment in which we've been living for centuries. Okay, and if now our environment is changing on a drastic level, our genetics, our nature needs to catch up to that. It's very difficult for genetics to adapt so quickly. So the best advice that I give to most of my clients and to my friends and to my family is to try to mimic as much as possible the way that we lived, the way that we ate, the way that we slept, as our ancestors did for so many years. The example of sleep, you know, follow your sleep schedule according to the night and the day. Wake up when it's day, go to sleep when it's dark. The example of food, you know, be careful with the food that you eat. Don't eat too much processed food. Don't eat too much junk food, because we never had those things in the past. Our bodies have not been adapted yet to be able to take those in heavy quantities. But really, you should try to stick to whole foods or to eat like we did in the past. I mean, you've probably heard a lot about keto diets or caveman diets, you know, those types of diets, or whole food diets. I mean, those are great, and there's a lot of really good results coming from those types of diets. All right, guys, so there you go. I just quickly wanted to bring this information to you because, you know, sometimes a lot of people don't really understand the point between nature and nurture and how our environment is changing so quickly. And, you know, this really relates to a lot of health problems these days because we are not adapted to the environment that we are creating right now. So just please be mindful. If you are ever unsure of how you should behave or what you should do, think about how our ancestors have been doing it for so long, because we are the product of our ancestors. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching the episode again. I really appreciate it. Please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. It will reach more people. Thank you for following me through my rants. I know sometimes I rant about stuff, but I do feel that this information needs to be shared. It is very useful. It has helped a lot of friends, a lot of family members. It's helped myself a lot, and I hope that it helps you. So there you go, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.